Okay, so I have to put everything in the wrong place, as usual. Looking at Successors. Played this this weekend, and what do I have to say about it? I mean, obviously this is viewed as a classic. This is, you know, approaching it for the first time in a long time, and you know, struggling through the concept of it because it is not easily accessible in a number of different ways. One is the rules. They're not terribly good, of course, but and the gloss hurts because when you've got it down on the table and it's shining up and you can't read it quite right, it doesn't make as good a reference as you think it should. I found the index didn't work. It's nice that they included one. It didn't work as well for me as I wanted it to. Like a lot of CDGs, things aren't necessarily included in the rules that are indicated somewhere. So for example, treasure cities are indicated on the map. The map's quite pretty, and the components overall are nice. I'll go into them in a bit. But well, there's little markers for treasure cities, these little red stars, and there's no rule for that. And when there's something on the board and there's no rule, it kind of irks me. Well, there's one card that handles that. I didn't get to it in my game. I thought I vaguely remembered that from my first game because I think I had it in my hand. And couldn't figure out what to do with all the points I got from it. Any more than I could figure out what to do with the points that I got normally. So that's actually one of the difficult things. When you pick this up and first start playing it, if no one's around to explain kind of what the game's going to be like, you probably are going to be lost. The one exception, the one value to that, the one thing that can help you with that is there's a pretty good example of play covering the first turn, giving some of the players' impressions, etc. And after I read that, I felt a lot more comfortable with, oh, this is what the game's about. I still didn't feel like I could make great decisions, and I know some of the people watching it right from the beginning were saying, you know, you got to leave garrisons behind or else revolts will hurt you. Well, it didn't really happen in this game, but it could have, and there's no question that you know, there could be problems if you don't garrison your back areas and you rely on them. But they're not important to much of anything except victory points, which is kind of weird. To me, when I'm looking at something that's going to cover, oh, how long does this game cover? It's got to be quite a while. If I can find the turn record chart. Looks like about 20 years. It seems like territory should be important in that kind of span. You know, if turns are long, there should be significant production, but there isn't. Production and everything really is all based on the cards or a couple key aspects. For example, the Macedonian player, whoever holds Macedonia gets an extra unit. Whoever has the most legitimacy gets an extra unit. And whoever has the most victory points, which is kind of your production, gets a couple extra mercenary units. Kind of makes sense. It may actually fit well, but it doesn't strike my, you know, intuitive grasp of a game of this scope very nicely. I feel like, ooh, wait a minute. I have all this territory. I should be getting X number of troops or something from it. I should have some reason to protect it. Because frankly, if you're not the top victory point holder, your victory points are meaningless. And that's actually kind of one of the intriguing things here is you have two ways to win the game. And that sounds really cool, actually. It leaves you with these horribly difficult decisions that I, of course, hate. But I think that's very attractive to a lot of players. I can go for, you know, trying to stock my victory points up and build up my empire. Of course, there's a big negative to that particular option, which is you end up as labeled as the usurper, and anyone can attack you without losing their champion status. The other version of victory is to go for burying Alexander, pretty much, getting that legitimacy up to 18. It takes just about everything to get it up to 18 if you don't bury Alexander. We looked at what Black had, and they had almost everything at the end of my game, before they lost, except burying Alexander. Had they turned around at the Hellespont and found themselves another place, they might have gotten away with it. It's just the fact that so many forces were coming back from blue out of the discard pile, and they get additional forces, that they were able to put that power in place. What if, well, could Black have escaped easily? You know, you've got all those heirs and everything in your train. You can't just lose your army and go back somewhere. They would have to be somewhere where people could get to and conglomerate on. Blue had enough force that they could have put it down in Asia Minor if need be, and red would have been closer, and yellow would have been closer. So, from the example of play, their play group seems to believe that the best way to win, or at least what they favor, is just charging up and trying to bury Alexander and getting the win that way. And it did seem, at least for the Black player, to be his best option. He's already got a lot of legitimacy. He's got the body. Why not try it? Avoid combat as long as you can, and then try to bully your way through. And he came damn close. But to me, that means that the games are going to almost invariably not take the full length of the game. And that winning, if the player who most wants to do that chooses to do that, and I think they want to, the other players are almost forced by that choice. Yellow went as much towards victory points as they could, and would have been in a very good condition if Alexander just rotted and all those heirs died off and everything. But that couldn't happen. And, you know, maybe the pile of stuff that Black eventually had shouldn't have conglomerated in one person's hands. Maybe that should not have been possible. Certainly a little bit of care with some of the other by some of the other players might have prevented that. But if your biggest army is going to be what you're going to face the guy who's running to get to Pella with the body, you know, do you really want to risk putting these valuable things somewhere else? Well, maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure about the strategy on that particularly. But what I can say is, I think that the way the victory conditions are aligned, I think that probably is the best strategy for the one player who's sitting on the body. He wants to get it up there. Can he take other strategies? Sure, it depends on what he draws. In the case that I had, and after maybe the first turn, which I was kind of stumbling around in, I didn't see another option. I had been building towards this one a little bit. And it definitely looked the most possible for him to get a victory. For the other players, then, if that becomes, you know, de rigueur, if the game is always going to be that race for Pella, I don't know if you're ever going to see the historical situation arise. You might see it with a bunch of blundering newbies. I know the first time that I played it, no example of play, just an attempt at an explanation from somebody who didn't really understand the game. I couldn't figure out what to do. And either myself or someone else let Alexander rot. So that just wasn't an option in that game. I don't know if we actually finished. I think there was... I don't really have a great memory of it. I don't remember terribly enjoying the game that time, but I do remember walking away saying, I want to get to play this solo because I think I'll understand it better then. And I think it is a game that you have to play at least once to get a feel enough to be competent. Twilight Struggle is another one very much like that. Washington's War may be another one. And now you're seeing a listing here of games that aren't war games. Is this? No, it's not. But I think it comes closer than maybe some of the others. First of all, it's less, if you compare it to Twilight Struggle is much more a political dynamics and power game than it is really a straight war game. And Washington's War is much less of a simulation. I feel like this actually manages some simulation qualities. There is still some weirdness, and it's those political control markers and how you place them and move them, and you know, these cards as to where you're applying your points or whatever. I see there are legitimate reasons to say that this is how this is working, and it makes sense, and it's still, I've got no problem with that. But I don't feel like it really is an in-depth enough simulation to qualify as a real war game there. Well, but that's okay. I'm not, you know, someone who just likes real war games. I like games like this too. I like a lot of different kinds of games. As a multiplayer game, it's hard. So the nature of it is very different from a lot of multiplayer games. I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of the same kind of diplomacy going on in this as there are in others, because victory looks like it's always kind of within reach. You know, it's not a matter of, there might be oh, we've got to stop him, he's going to get there. And there might be a little bit of cooperation there, but I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of long-term commitments to help one another. It feels like the game changes too quickly for that, and that everybody's goals are really down to, okay, I can't win now, but is anybody else close? You know, can I stop them? That kind of nature. That comes out late in the game, maybe, in something like Here I Stand, or in Napoleonic Wars, or something like that. But in this, the first turn feels like you're preparing. The second turn, you're going for the victory from then on. You really are. And the preparing is a period where nobody really knows for sure who has the advantage. You're trying to build up your position so that what you have planned will fall into place. And that kind of aspect, I think, could be very, very enjoyable to a certain kind of player. It's not my style terribly. I prefer, I don't know what I prefer. I don't like something as subtle as this, where everything's kind of, where your plans are kind of hidden in a sort of, to that extent. I like a game that kind of bludgeons you with, okay, well, here's what it's about, and you're going after this, and it's clear to do that. And that's probably my biggest gripe about it. About the components, like I said, the map is quite nice, and it's got a really interesting texture to it as well. Counters, I love the little red ones, but overall they're very, very good. The only problem there, missing turn counter. Apparently that's not the fault of whoever I bought this from. It's standard. Cards. This is pretty much a deluxe treatment with the hard map and everything. I expected the cards to be stiffer than they are. I'm really thankful they're not. But one thing I have to say, you have to reshuffle them every turn. And even in just one playing, I'm seeing a little bit of marking on them. So for those of you who believe in safe shuffling, You might want to do it right from the start, because even one time can get you. Yeah, I am. Anyway, kind of disappointing on these little colored things. I wish there had been a set of black ones as well as the other colors of the game. There's no real reason for them except for leaders who are in play, and I don't think it would be a huge expense to have put in, 3 more little pieces of plastic. But I don't know. Certainly the counter printing, that's a big deal to try to fix. Overall, again, this isn't something that I'm going to really say I love the idea of the game. It's not going to hit my table a lot, but I'm glad I own it. I think it would be great for the kind of group that likes to play the same game fairly often. The kind of group I was used to didn't really like doing that, or at least some of us didn't, and certainly a game like this wouldn't have gotten a lot of playings just because of its nature. It's longer, it's a war game-ish. Those of us who were into longer war game-ish games wanted to play different ones regularly. Those who were into the lighter games didn't mind so much playing the same thing over and over again, but they would hate playing something this, fairly complex too many times in one year. So I don't really know, or haven't known, the kind of people who like playing something like this, but it definitely has its following, and I can see why. It's got this subtle kind of strategies that first the build up and then the trying to win all at once. I just wish that there was a harder choice. I don't know. I don't know if there's a way of doing it, because you want to make burying the body important. You want to make a legitimate succession proper and the way you want to go. But it feels like once somebody heads on that path, you're doomed to it. Which is to say, the 3 people who were close to Pella were the ones with a shot at the game in the end, because black made their choice. Could yellow have stopped them earlier? Maybe. Maybe they could have taken a swing earlier. Maybe a good move is to say, whoa, that guy's just unacceptable. You can't bury Alexander. Yellow may have said, I'm too far in the lead, but in the wrong position, if they were clever enough, and tried to take Babylon right at the beginning, within the first turn, maybe by the end of the first turn, or early in the second, be prepared to hit him really hard. You start doing that, and you might force a burial. If the player who's holding Babylon is kind of weak, you might force a burial just to avoid that body from falling into somebody who's more capable's hands at that point. That's kind of a lose-lose proposition, though. Do you want to try to sneak out and probably lose him, or do you want to just, spike him on the ground and say, hey, that's good enough for us? Yeah. In terms of playing players from groups that I'm used to, though, it certainly is not something that I would have seen very often. So for me, if I'm trying to bring a game to a group and it's a new game, I don't want to bring something, and they're not used to kind of military type games or longer games. I don't want to bring something where they're going to sit there and just say, I don't know what to do. And I do that enough. I certainly don't want to do it with something that I would have sat there and said, I don't know what to do. So this is a difficult game, I think, for a newer player to be looking at. And for somebody like me, I should have lots and lots of experience with games, right? I had a hard time getting my head around what I should be doing for a turn. So, it's kind of a weird slot of this. It's got to addict you. It's got to reach you. And maybe you can't have, 800 games as well, because you probably, don't want to play this enough times to get a really, really good feel. Now, I feel like if I sat down at a game of it, I wouldn't embarrass myself like I did the first time. Now, but in a week, I'll probably have forgotten, because the rules are filled with little special case type things, and it really does take a bit of work to get a grasp around them, and it's not necessarily easy to find the piece you want. You know, if you want to find out how independents react, etc., you really have to kind of comb through it to find the little snippets of rules you want. The index isn't powerful like it is in some games, and it's not set up in a fashion that I find intuitive, which is par for the course with GMT for me. Very seldomly, at least with their CDGs, do I walk away with, oh yeah, I know how to find something. Pacific, the Empire of the Sun. I knew how to find things. I didn't know if I had to find them, though, because these little rules slip your mind so you don't know to look them up. But that's a step here. Yeah, but you know, the fact that these games don't all build off of each other the way normal war games, the traditional type, seem to, has always been a problem for me. Anyway, overall, I think it's a good game. I don't think it's going to ever be one of my favorites just because it takes too big an investment to get much out of it. Once you get that much out of it, it might be as good as, I don't know. It might be as good as other games that I like, but you know, it's just got such an odd sort of means of trying to figure out, you know, what you're doing on the board. An odd sort of, the victory conditions are so weird, and then how to reach them is just not intuitive to me. So the examples of play go into people just sitting around building armies. That may be the best thing to do, but it doesn't feel right. You know, I believe in conquering stuff so that I can build more. And this just, honestly, I don't think that that's even historically accurate. That, like, sitting around not expanding your own personal domain is the best way to, like, prepare yourself for that long march to Pella. I don't know.